Well, welcome everybody to the Nashville Power BI user group. This is our January meetup, and we've got a great presentation today by Mr. Thomas LeBlanc. He's going to help our Power BI reports run faster. I know that's a problem that a lot of people face, so I'm curious to see what techniques he has. Usually good data modeling to start with, but even the best of us have problems at times. So I'm curious to see what techniques he's got to keep our Power BI reports running fast. We've got a few announcements. I'm going to talk about some of the things that are coming up, some of the things that are new in Power BI, and then, like I said, we've got a featured presentation from Thomas LeBlanc on how to make your reports run faster. So first of all, I want to talk about our future meeting that's coming up next month on Thursday, February 20th, data-driven fitness, leveraging Power BI to optimize health behavior change. I know I'm really looking forward to that myself, how we can make progress there in a systematic way. So I'm looking to see what Nick's got to say on that next month. And we were just talking about hopefully maybe having a speaker that you guys have heard from recently talking about TMDL, maybe in an upcoming month. So TBD on that, but TMDL is a new language for Power BI that I think could really make things a lot easier for people who develop in Power BI a lot. So I'd be super interested to hear about that. And we're always interested in new speakers. So if you guys have a topic that you would like to hear about or present on, definitely talk to one of us, talk to me, talk to Sekou, talk to Michael Hewitt. And we love to hear from you guys about how we can get that topic on the list. I want to tell you guys about some of the upcoming conferences. So I've got a few that are local and free coming up in just a second. But first, I wanted to hit some of these bigger conferences. So we've got Data Days in Austin, Texas coming up on January 25th. They've got a lot of presentations here. It's going to be a pretty big conference. I will admit is a little pricey with that one. And obviously you would need to be in Austin on this day, but it does seem like they've got a lot of interesting topics for that one. A little bit closer to home and certainly a lot cheaper. We got SQL Saturday. These are usually about $15, $17 with lunch. And so we got one coming up in Atlanta. This is the first time I've heard it referred to as AI and BI. So I'm really excited to see how they're bringing AI into the conversation these days. Such a proponent of AI, and just all the time I'm finding new stuff that it can do for me. And I'm just floored by all the exciting innovations that we're seeing in AI and the rapid growth there. So it'll be fun to see what they've got there. That's coming up on the 8th of March, and that's in Alpharetta, Georgia, so north side of Atlanta. They haven't announced the sessions that they've accepted yet, but hoping that I'll be presenting there. And I have a feeling that Michael and Sekou will also be there. Hopefully, Jason, you might be there. I don't know, but we've got a bunch of Nashville regulars who present at Atlanta from time to time. We've also got sessions coming up in Houston, Redmond, Richmond, Jacksonville, and New York City. So if any of those are close to you, or if you just want to go talk at those sessions, then those would be some great opportunities. You've also got the Power BI and Fabric Global Summit coming up February 24th through the 28th. You can go to globalpowerbisummit.com. This is a virtual conference, and it's put on by the folks at Radicat. It's an online conference. Anywhere in the world, you can attend that one virtually. One of the big conferences in the Fabric space all year, the Microsoft Fabric Community Conference coming up at the MGM Grand. So this is going to be the 31st of March through April 2nd, with 2 pre-con days on the front end and a day on the back end as well. So you can go to fabricconf.com to sign up for that. That's going to be a big conference. So that would probably be the one to go to for Fabric specific. And then there's also Half Data Community Summit. So this is kind of like the OG big data conference, certainly in Seattle on November 17th to the 21st. So if anybody's looking for a birthday present for me, admission to Ticket to Pass Summit, that might be nice. So you can go into that website there to check that out. They don't have the sign up yet. The website's from 24 is still up there, but you can sign up for updates for 25. And a little closer to home. And again, I think all of these are free. You've got Data Nerds. They do a breakfast every month. They also do some other things as well. This happens to be the next one in their queue. Yeah, they're pretty active. So they do breakfast at 5. I think it's the third Tuesday, is it? So it's January 21st. It's going to be 8:30 to 10 at Fido in the Hillsborough Village area. So if you happen to be free for breakfast that day, stop by and hang out with them. They also do some great women in tech stuff as well. The Nashville Data Engineering Group. So if you've been around data engineering for a while, you probably know Charlie Apesian, great guy, all around fun dude, and pillar of the tech community in Nashville for quite a while now. I was actually just at his user group, the Data Science Meetup, on Monday, and I had a great presenter there. So he'll be talking on the 22nd back at Tech Hill Commons, for talking about using Databricks and Azure to customize large language models. So if you're into any sort of data science, AI, large language models, Gen AI, you're definitely going to want to check that out. And then coming back to data science, their next meetup is going to be on February 17th, again, Tech Hill Commons. And Will Crushorn is going to be presenting on some of the work that he's done. He's created Fresh AI at Wendy's, which I believe is a voice activated ordering system at Wendy's. All right, so let's talk about what is new in Power BI. They've been working on Power BI in PowerPoint, or what they're calling storytelling in PowerPoint, and they've added a few usability enhancements there that just make that a little bit easier. So if you've used that and there's some things that just kind of bug you, particularly going from page to page or resetting some of the behavior, before you had to take that visual out and put it back in again to reset that, kind of a frustrating pain. So they've worked on some of those things. They've also got some enhancements to both the text slicer, which I am super excited to be able to start using that, and some enhancements to the tree map visuals. There's something in there called squarified, which basically means that it tries to eliminate the super long rectangular boxes in the tree map and make them more kind of squared off. Yeah, if that's something that's important to you, definitely check that out. Also, when viewing and editing the semantic model on the web, you can now look at version history. And I understand you can revert back to old versions, which is really nice. 'Cause if you mess something up in the service for the longest time, you were just kind of in trouble. And so now you can actually go back to a previous working state. So that's really helpful. And they're also bringing the TMDL scripting experience into Power BI Desktop. And so hence why I'm trying to get our semantic model hero to do a presentation on TMDL in the future. I think it's got a lot of opportunity to make development in Power BI a lot more scalable. They've got some new visuals that I'm just going to skip over. You can check those out. Some great visuals up there. And the main other thing I want to talk about is org apps. So they now have multiple apps per workspace. This is as of late November, so this has been around for a little while, but since our last regular session. And another thing is that you can now propagate the revocation of build access. So what I mean is that before, when you were publishing an app, you could grant everybody who is in an app audience build access on the data set, meaning that they'd be able to build other reports, other Power BI reports, or the analyze in Excel functionality. They could build Excel files on that data set. If you remove them from that app audience, they no longer have access to the app itself, but they still had build permissions. And there was not an automatic revocation of that build access. You're going to manually go in and per user restrict that access. So now when you take them out of an app audience, you can have that build access revocation propagate through the system and it'll automatically take that build access away. It's nice that they're closing that security. And coming next month, also the one-link catalog in Power BI Desktop. So you've had that in the Power BI service for a while. So now they're putting that into Power BI Desktop. Some new things for Excel. So this is from about November 4th. So since our last meetup, there are some Copilot enhancements to transforming data and basically using Copilot and text to build out some visuals and some of the things that you want to do there. They've also got text analysis in Excel, so think word clouds and sentiment analysis and some things. And so what used to require some data science expertise, you can now do that in Excel pretty simply. There's also a new Python editor in Excel for Windows. I haven't had a chance to use that yet, but if you're a Python person, that could be a really useful functionality, especially if you need to hand something over to someone who knows Excel but isn't a Python developer. That might be one way to split the difference, and you can build something and then give it to somebody in a way that they're comfortable with. And they also now have tighter Microsoft Forms integration. So they've had some of this Forms integration in Excel for the web, I think, for a while, but so now they're getting it in the Excel windows. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Thomas LeBlanc, and he's going to help us make our Power BI reports run fast.
Sure, real quick, Mike, I'm going to cut you off.
Yeah,
real quick. Before you dive in that, job posting. So if you're hiring, anybody looking to hire, post it in the comments, let us know. Drop online as well. And then there's one opportunity that just came across my desk. Rutherford County based client company needs Power BI administrator. So it's a full-time direct hire position, or you can work hybrid. So if you're in a job hunt, let me know. I can make a referral, or if you have anything that you're looking for, post it in the chat or come up the camera.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Thomas, take it away, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, so in Nashville, thanks for having me, especially virtually. I don't know if I could have made it up there in person. This is a talk titled Faster Power BI Reports, or Make Your Power BI Run Faster. My name is Thomas LeBlanc. I'm an architect, just to tell you a little more about myself. I am a Microsoft Data Platform MVP. It's been that for the last 7 years. Recently, I got to update the only Power BI performance book on the market, Power BI Performance Best Practices. I was able to edit this first edition and create a second edition. It was published back in August. I think Packet has been running a sale on books right now. So you might even be able to get it for about $9.99 recently. If you don't know anything about me, I like to label myself as a database normalization nut. So that basically meant if, as a database administrator, if you didn't have your relational database for your application in third, fourth, or fifth normal form, you had the wrath of Thomas upon you. What I learned about that was developers don't care about the wrath of Thomas, and they'll develop their own databases the way they want to. So I moved on to data warehousing, where I learned about the dimensional modeling from Kimball and learned that I can create my own databases with my own primary keys, foreign keys, and everything else. And it was like I lived happily ever after. So besides that, I was a developer at one time. I developed in Fox Pro, Visual Fox Pro, RBase, VB 2 through 6, and then right when .NET was coming out was when I transferred over to being in the data field. I wasn't good at interfaces. I was really good with data. So I moved over to DBA and eventually to data warehousing. If you're looking for me online today, I'm mainly going Blue Sky. I'm the Power BI dude. If you're on Twitter or X, I still have an account there called the Smiling DBA. I am part of our local user group. So we have what we call the Baton Rouge user groups in Baton Rouge, where we have data, dev, and analytics together under one umbrella. There's a monthly meeting that we do in person at one of the local libraries. And then we have an analytics user group called BRAIN, Baton Rouge Analytics and Intelligence Network. It's kind of open to anything analytics wise. They meet separately from us. We do have SQL Saturdays here in Baton Rouge. I think I got my shirt on today. Jason probably has a shirt similar to this. He was down here back in the end of July. It's usually end of July, beginning of August that we do our SQL Saturday. And we have had 2 BI editions in 2020, right before the pandemic, like a week before that pandemic. Seco was down here then. And then we had one in 2022, but we really haven't had the pull to do that again, or really the volunteers. So we stick to our bread and butter. It was originally created by Patrick LeBlanc from Guys in a Cube. He used to live here in Baton Rouge. He actually created the SQL Server user group in Baton Rouge, and we're really happy he did, because he did a lot of work with it with another guy named William Asfus, who actually works for Microsoft with SQL Server documentation now. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about a bunch of different things, and we'll have individual demos for each one. But data modeling is probably the top of the list for performance. I'll get into some other things we've discovered recently about it. Look at some of the external tools that you can use to look at the performance or enhance the performance or enhance your model itself. One particular thing we'll look at specifically is about the auto date and how it kind of interferes with conform dimensions. Talk about just cleaning up your model, what you should remove, maybe what you should change. Look at a busy screen. That's usually most issues with people, I think, initially, is they kind of cram a lot of stuff on one screen, and it gets a little busy. So we'll look at one way to kind of avoid that in a certain way and talk about some little things you can do to help increase that. And then, of course, one of the bigger issues is always, if you do a full deployment or a full refresh of a model, it takes up a lot of time, especially when you get larger and larger data. So we'll look at an actual demo of using incremental refresh to refresh a model. I guess if y'all have any questions along the way, someone just can butt in, and I'll be happy to answer questions. The first thing is about data modeling. So what I see the most is usually something between just a flat file versus a dimensional model. Some people don't know what a dimensional model is, but what they do is they're ready to use Power BI, and someone says, here's the data I want you to create a report for, and it's usually just this flat file of data. Someone exported data from Excel, our favorite BI tool. And then today, I think what I see or hear more is not dimensional modeling the Kimball way, but a star schema, which is confused me in a way, but I'm slowly adapting to what those people are talking about. But basically, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a flat file. And all I did was I just went to the AdventureWorks database. I created a view that just joined a fact table with all the dimensions and then just tried to put as many columns as I could into one model, just to mimic what might be done when you import a flat file. If you don't know what a star schema is, here's a beautiful picture with the green, gold, and purple. So just to give you a little Louisiana taste in my presentation here. But what we have here is we have in the center a fact table. And usually a fact table has something that makes a row unique. In this case, it's a transactional where the header and detail are put together into one table. It's kind of like the denormalization of a normalized view, which took me a while to understand, especially because of that, database normalization nut I was. It was took a while to crack the nut where I could adapt to dimensional modeling. And dimensional modeling is just easier for reporting, for one. Number two, it makes things a lot faster, return data for analytics and reporting. And number three, you're able to create these data marts that eventually you can kind of spin together in a hub and spokes and actually create a large data warehouse. The Kimball is to get things quicker to the end user as possible. And that's why the Iman kind of went to the Kimball, I don't know how many years ago, but this is usually something that's just easier to look at and view. The other key is the surrogate keys, which in this one you can see with the suffix of S key, and that is an integer that's generated based on what's called a dimension table. So that key, and usually it has the same name in both tables, which makes it easier to join because you know that it's the same key. But the integer wise is it was faster to join. It's interesting today, we did an analysis of a hash key, and the only thing that really gets bigger inside of Power BI is the dictionary. And as you get a larger volume, it looks like it doesn't make a significant difference, which threw me off completely. But if the hash key is generated by the business key of your dimension, then you have a problem if you need to do some sort of slowly changing effect on a dimension table, which I won't get into details of slowly changing, but basically the points on the star are the joins between the fact table and the dimension. And in the fact table itself, usually you've got a set of numerics that you're reporting. Kind of can ignore this for now. That might be something we spin off into a junk dimension. But you got numerics, and then you're drilling and slicing by the attributes within your dimensions. Some of these dimension tables could be denormalized as well. And you might see a snowflake schema, which we'll see an example of that. So let's jump into the demo, the first one. And first we'll go to this flat file. So if you look to the far right, you'll see that we just have one table, one query, whatever you want to call it based on the transformations you did in Power BI, but it's kind of flattened out. It's just all the columns all in one table, and here's the effect of it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go up top to this external tools, and I've installed DAX Studio, which is a free tool from SQL BI, Italian buddies across the ocean, and they've created this great tool to do an analysis of a model. So this DAX Studio is now connected to my Power BI semantic model. If you're not familiar with the semantic model is really the tabular model, which is in what's called analysis services. So if I were to go, I always like to show this. If I go to my task manager and I drill into the Power BI desktop, you'll see analysis services running right here. So when we crank up Power BI, we're actually invoking the analysis services engine on our local machine. You see two of them because I have two Power BIs open right now. But that's the engine. DAX Studio can connect to the engine, whether it be in the service, on a PBIX file, or even analysis services itself. And up in the menu, you have something called Advanced. And here we have View Metrics. So I'm going to click on View Metrics. And what it's going to do is going to do an analysis of that model in memory. And if we go to the summary, we'll see that this thing takes up right now about 123 megabytes. If I switch to a data model. So here is basically the same data, except it's actually built like a star schema. So in the middle, I have my cells, and then I got a points of the star to my dimensions. And then I even have a snowflake. I go to product, product to subcategory, subcategory to category. So actually this one is a snowflake schema. It's the same data, same relational database in SQL Server. And if I go up to external tools in that DAX Studio, I'll get another connection, bring this across, go to advanced and view metrics. I can see that this one is smaller by about 40 megabytes. Plus, this one has more attributes on it than the flat file. So right off the bat, you see that using a star schema can be more efficient in the storage here, about one third or one fourth smaller than the flat file. And there would be ways that you could take that flat file and try to separate the dimensions from it. You might need some keys for some, but it might be something to look into just to make your model more compact. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the columns here. I'm try to put these side by side or one above the other, just so we can look at these columns together. Initially, what we do see is there's one big one right at the beginning, sales key, which takes up about 42, about 41% of the database. And if you notice in the smaller one, it actually takes up, and in the flat one, it actually takes up less as a percentage. But if you look a little bit further down, you'll see product name. Product name takes up about 8% of the size of the database. If we go try to find that same column in the model, it's called product instead of product name here, but it only takes up 0.17%. So you can see, since we've separated product into its own dimension, there's less occurrences of it, which takes up less space, which makes the model run faster or more efficient. And so this is a beautiful tool to use to compare those two. I'm gonna go ahead and open up my next one just to get it ready. I guess y'all all know about memory hang up sometimes. All right, so that's a demo of the dimensional model versus the flat, why we use it. Initially, you can see that the size is different. And then we actually looked at one of the external tools. Something I found not too long ago from Chris Webb. If you don't go follow Chris Webb's blogs, you probably should start now. He's doing a great job of doing short, very pointed, direct blogs right now that help a lot understand specific things. This is one which something that I didn't realize, but there's two separations of the memory used by a Power BI model and the other resources it might need to do reporting, security, row level security. But an interesting thing here is there's stuff called evictable versus non-evictable memory. So if you got something in memory and then you're trying to view another model, it'll try to get rid of the stuff that's evictable before the non-evictable stuff so you can go work separately on your data. So I highly encourage you to go look at this. It says part one. I don't know if I ever saw part two come out, but this one I thought was very, very good. And he does just a great job of explaining stuff on a level I can understand. So we looked at DAX Studio. If you install these external tools, they become available in Power BI in this menu choice, external tools. There's a couple other ones like Tabular Editor and one I've used in the past, not as much now because of some of the CI/CD that's coming out, but there's one called AML Toolkit. I used to use this when we just did analysis services, tabular models on premises where we could compare the schemas. So you saw view metrics with DAX Studio. There's another part, one part of it, where you can actually look at the storage engine versus the formula engine. The formula engine is the query, kind of the query plan like you do in SQL Server, whereas the storage engine is the memory and to disk stuff of getting the data. Also, inside of Power BI, you have something called the Performance Analyzer. And here you can analyze or do a trace on what's going on inside of your PBIX file. There are a bunch of other options, which we won't get into, but DAX Studio has a lot of things that are really helpful to you. That visual, when you're looking at a visual and you want to see what's causing it to take so long to render, then you could go to the Performance Analyzer in the desktop. The tabular editor has something called Best Practice Analyzer. So you can bring a model up in the tabular editor and run this set of scripts or set of rules, and it'll give you ideas to optimize your model, which is pretty good. Those set of rules can also be customized. So if you can figure out the language of how they create the rules, you can write your own rules inside of that. That external tool AML toolkit lets you compare the metadata. So I could compare the metadata on my PBIX file to the metadata of a deployed semantic model, and it'll show me the differences, which is good if you want to see what changes you made versus what changes you didn't make. I'm always used to always start making, thinking, okay, I'll make this one change, and then I'm in the model and I make like 10 or 12 changes, and I forget. I'm like, oh, you should have saved that initially, and then then figured out later the next additional thing. So it's good to kind of give you a before and after. I went to try to look at the history part the other day that Michael was showing for the new features, and I couldn't find it on mine. So sometimes it's just taking a while to get deployed to my where my tenant is. But to troubleshoot performance, what we're going to do is we're going to capture a query with that performance analyzer. We're going to run it in DAX Studio and look at the engines. And then this is what takes experience, is how to optimize a DAX query or a DAX measure, or what to use, what not to use. I'm not a DAX expert. My mentality today, and it might be just because of my old age, is just try to figure out where you go find the answer rather than try to produce the answer yourself. So I've learned over time that I'm not going to try to memorize everything to do so. I have so many places that I can go to find the answer, and that serves me well. There's a guy named Nicola. He has something called Data Mozarks. When I first did this presentation, probably over a year ago, he had a great article called Brains and Muscles, and it describes the storage engine versus the formula engine. So if you go to his article, his Data Mozart site, it's a really good read. I would suggest it if you don't know anything about the storage and formula engine. So let's go look at a demo. All right, so what we have here is we have a bad DAX. There's two tables here. One has the formula here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this one. And then the other one has this DAX. I'm going to put them both together so you can see the differences between there. So initially, this was the distinct count. And what it is it's a distinct order count for a customer based on a large order, meaning an order that's over $500. And this one does not perform very well. It takes a couple seconds to render that table, whereas this one takes fractions of a second. Now, the big difference here is in the filter statement. So here, and I mean, if I were creating this, it seemed like the right thing to do. Filter, table name, condition. But the issue with this, and we'll see in a second, is that it actually goes row by row after the context filter of the visual to figure out which ones are over $500. Whereas this one takes a smaller, first it uses all in the filter to just filter, remove the filter context on it, get the whole table and just the sales amount, and then just filter that and then apply that or condition it greater than 500, and then filter your distinct count that it's doing. So we're gonna look at this. I'm gonna chop that off. I am gonna go to the view menu choice. I'm going up to view, and I'm gonna click on Performance Analyzer. And what Performance Analyzer does is lets us start a recording. So I'm gonna start a recording, and then I'm gonna refresh the visuals. And you'll see the two tables, and one's taking longer than the other. This one, it seems the query runs at about 25 milliseconds, but this one, it takes almost 8 seconds to run that query. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy that query. SQL BI just did a talk of their tools, and they were showing how to use this export. I'm not going to go into it, but you can actually export everything and bring it into different tools to analyze. And I'm just going to look at that one query. So I'm going to launch DAX Studio. I'm going to paste that query in, and up here, I'm going to tell it to do server timings. There's a query plan as well. It's very, very complicated. If you want to dig real deep, you could use that. I'm also going to tell it to clear my cache on run, and then I'm going to run that query. And it's going to take a while. And the reason, if you're from the SQL Server world, this is like a query or an update or whatever you do that's row by agonizing row. That's actually what this thing is doing, except it's doing it based on the rows that are in the table, and the table has the date. So the date is the distinct count per customer. So you see, it's taken a while. And what we're going to eventually see is over here in the kind of middle left, there's a thing called storage engine queries. And we're going to see here that this one takes 1,095 queries, and you can see them individually here. And it's like it goes, row by row from that table to apply that, not the filter context, but the condition where sales is greater than 500 for each in a row. And watch this middle part. This is interesting. This is a timeline. Watch as we scroll down. You can see where it's running. You can see those running over and over again. It's the same exact query. Now let's go and copy the query from the run that runs faster. And I'll preface this by saying I didn't optimize this. I found someone showed a similar thing, and I just adapted it to this particular data set for AdventureWorks. But if I go turn on the server timings for this, make sure the clear on run is set, and run it, it's pretty quick. And you'll notice here it did one row, one select from that whole data set just on the sales amount, and reduced the size of the data set that went into the distinct count. And you can see that here. It's only 2 storage engine queries. So here's the formula engine, here's the storage engine. Usually any of your performance is usually on the storage engine side. Seldom have I heard or seen anything with the formula engine, basically because that's just the compilation of the DAX query itself. It's not a DAX formula for measure, but it actually does the DAX query, which is what we see up here. And you can see the milliseconds as well as the queries, and then if anything was in cache. So again, I'm not trying to say, oh, here's the greatest way to optimize a DAX query. What I'm trying to show is here's an external tool that'll let you look at those particular measures to see which is running bad and which is not, along with the performance analyzer. We recently here at 3Cloud, we installed, if you look on some of the Fabric workspaces now, there is a workspace monitoring. The workspace monitoring actually does a profiler trace, like you do profiler traces in analysis services through SQL Server Management Studio. It actually takes that just like it used to do in log analytics for a workspace, and it puts it in an event house. And now we're starting to examine the queries in the event house. Why would you do that? Say, for instance, a guy prompted us to look at this because he's like a managed services person. So they don't go get the PBIX file from a person and then try to run it to debug it. They want to see what's going on the service side, so that workspace monitoring and log analytics can go capture the profile, and then you could drill down with this KQL syntax to actually show you where that DAX problem is. One thing we saw is that the visual identifier is a GUID, not a name. So you're still gonna need to extract the metadata from a PBIX file, or in this case, a PBIP folder structure, to get the matchup to the GUID to the actual visual name. Another good reason to name your visuals in your model. All right, I'm gonna open up the next couple. and get those going. I love it how Power BI always asks me if I want to save something and I didn't make any changes. You ever get that? Not the only one then, huh?
All the time.
So I didn't change nothing. Why you asking me? Then I get scared that I did change something. I'm like, oh man, am I going to mess something up?
I'll just like move a mouse or something, and then it'll just like be able to save it.
Yeah. I don't know what I changed, but I changed something. I'm trying to close down some of these windows just to make sure everything goes smoothly. All right, so this is one some people, new to Power BI don't even know. They just are learning Power BI and things are coming easily to them. I mean, Microsoft has made it where if you have a E5, you get Power BI Pro. So I mean, they're pushing this to the masses, and people new just don't know these things. And there's an optional setting for enabling what's called auto date. There's a global setting individually for you, as well as an individual file. So you could turn this on and off globally. So all new PBIX files either have it on or off, or you can disable it and then turn it on and off for your individual PBIX file. What this does is it actually adds a table for every date column, every date, time, and time column that you have inside of the model itself. You would never know this because it doesn't show it to you, but it is extra data in the model. In in the beginning of the talk, we talked about data modeling. We look flat file versus, a star schema. Well, if you use that in a flat file, there's no way to make that what's called a conform dimension. If you don't know what conform dimension is, I'm going to kind of draw it out at a basic level, but you ought to go to the Kimball group. Even though most of them are retired now, they still run the Kimball Group site, and there's individual blogs or individual articles on it, and you could look at one called Conform Dimension. We're going to look at an example of that. I'm going to go straight into the demo. Try to do as many demos as possible, but you know how demos go sometimes. It's like I'm in I want a live audience laughing with me, and it's just not happening. So if you notice here, we see these little arrows next to our dates, okay? And it's not obvious at first because if we go look at either the table view or our model view, it doesn't show what's those additional data really is. But if I go to our favorite tool, DAX Studio, or I can even go to Tabular Editor, we'll see these additional tables. So here you've got a template date table along with one for each of those individual dates. If we go to view metrics, we can see it takes up about 10% of our space. Well, which in first look is like, oh, that's not too significant. But these tables it'll look at the column that it's building it from, and it'll find the smallest date to the largest date. So you can imagine something like a sales might not be that big of a deal, but like I came from a loan servicing company, and they would have, loans that were originated back, in the 80s, and then they're, 15, 20, 30-year loans. The ending date of the loan was, decades into the future. So it could get very, very, very large. It's, especially if you have a large range, plus you have a bunch of date columns. And you can't turn it off individually for the date. It has to be turned off on the whole model. So I'm going to close that DAX editor, and I'm going to show you under File, Options and Settings. I'm down here. And I always click on the wrong one. I usually click on Data Source Settings. But since I'm talking it through today, I know I should click on Options. That was another joke I need to laugh at. Up here is our global data load, and down here is our current file data load. And if you look in global, the time intelligence labeled real nicely that, hey, you should probably use auto date time if you want time intelligence in your model. If you don't know what time intelligence is, go to the Kimball group and you can read. Well, I don't know if the Kimball group has that, but use your favorite search tool, Bing or Google, and Google Power BI time intelligence, and you'll find a lot of information on that. But I could turn it on and off here at the global level, which will say if a new file is created, either add it or don't add it. But in this file itself, the data for current files shows it turned on. Here's another thing. If you notice, next to some of these options, you have a little information icon. On this one, there's even a link that says more information or learn more. If you ever, in my experience, if you've ever seen that, then Microsoft has got enough feedback from it that they want you to know to go somewhere to learn more about this. So it's an issue that they're not directly saying it's an issue, but they're giving you more information about it. That's my opinion. It might not be true, but you can learn more. So if you notice the little arrows by the tables, if I uncheck that and click OK, if I'd have kept the DAX Studio open, it would have just disappeared instantly in there. I forgot to show you how synced up DAX Studio was. But if I click on it, you'll notice that all goes away. Now, why would you want not to use that? So let's get into this other visual and look at our model. So this is the model we had earlier. And if we zoom in, we can see here our date dimension has a series of relationships. There's one in the middle that's solid, and then there's two that's dotted. This is the active relationship. It's on the order date key, and the other two are what's called inactive. So if they're inactive, we can still use DAX, like we can still create a measure that says go use this other relationship to calculate the measure based on due date or ship date. But every measure we create within internet sales is going to use that order date for anything that's inside the DAX that requires that. Now, what is a conformed dimension? So let's say, for instance, I had some other type of sales. Here we have internet sales. I'm going to go to transform data, and I'm going to go add an additional fact table. Actually, what I'm going to do is recent, local. I'm going to add two tables here just to show you conform versus non-conform. So in my small DW, I'm going to grab fact reseller sales, and I'm also going to grab dim reseller. And before I import those into my model, I'm going to do a little cleanup. I always like to clean up my settings. I like take the dim off the reseller and take the fact off the reseller sales. Also, I usually go to remove columns and I take out all that fluff on the end. It's just the relationships between all the foreign keys it found. I'm going to take off some of these text columns along with some of the, well, one of the dates in this case. For reseller, did I want to clean up that? Yeah, I want to take, it's having a problem refreshing. That's all my problems today. That's okay. I'm going to take off some of these keys. And now I have a new dimension and a new fact table. I'm going to close and apply, and it's going to refresh that data in my model. The whole point of this is to show you how a date dimension can be conformed within a model. So if you notice, it didn't join any columns because the names weren't the same, but we have a date S key in my date dimension, and then we have due date and order date. So I'm going to grab that order date key, drag it over to the date S key. It's a many to one. If I did it the other way, it would call it a one to many. And you'll notice it already selected one as the active relationship. So this was going to be the inactive relationship. And now this order date is conformed between internet sales and reseller sales. Well, what does that mean? Let me do a little more cleanup here. I just like taking the summarize off of everything. I also like to hide all the columns within my fact table. But if I go to this model and I go to this extra page, you'll see I have internet sales summed up. Very simple measure, nothing complicated about it. I am going to change the auto decimals to 0. With a conformed dimension, I'm using ordered year from the date dimension. I can put other measures from other fact tables that have that same conformed dimension together. So I can go to reseller sales, which is not in my model because I hid it. I'll have to go back to the model view. And I'm just going to create RS equals sum of sales. I really like the IntelliSense here. It's very quick. And now I should be able to see reseller. And if you notice that it became apparent and it put it in the top of the list because there's only measures within that table. Some people have their own measure table they create underscore measure to bring everything to the top, but I'm going to use the actual table name. I'm going to take that 0 off and I could add that reseller sales right next to internet sales. Not only can I do that, but I can also create a total sales equals internet sales plus reseller sales. Take that auto decimal and put it right next to it. So that's the key to not using the auto date, is that if you have your own date dimension, it's more efficient, less duplication, and also I can conform between fact tables inside of here if it's using the same date type. And that, in our case, it's order date to order date. If it was some other kind of date, you might need a different date dimension just to label it differently. What tools and strategies do you use to find and remove unused parts of the model? Also, how much unused measure columns, tables impact on performance? Well, I'm going to go to one first. The measures themselves do not impact performance unless they are used. So if you create measures and it's never put in the report, it never gets used and never renders. So those are rendered when you display them in a visual. To find out what's used and what's not, well, if you're using best practices, you might create a semantic model and then create various reports off of one semantic model. I don't know of a tool that can do that today. I don't know if you looked in, yeah, I've got that one in here. If you looked in external tools, Measure Killer can do it within one model with one report, which is easy to figure out because you can see if it's used or not. Shannon did one too that'll take a model with a template file and just generate everything using. I think there's about 3 or 4 that do it if the report is in the same semantic model PBIX file. If it's separated, which I bring that up because that's really a best practice you should use, then there's no tools to really do that. It's really hard to do that. So Pedro is saying Measure Killer can go between PBIX files. And that's good. Jokingly, I would go remove a bunch of stuff, publish it, and see who complains. That kind of solves 2 problems. Is someone using your model? And then what columns are they using? That's the mean one. That'd be the mean Thomas doing that. The nut, not the normal one, not the smiling DBA. All right, now let's keep going here. Unnecessary columns. Coincidentally, clean up your model, especially text columns. If you got a date time, see if you can just use the date part of the time. I really don't see a lot of analytical reporting that looks at time specific, like hour, minute, second, millisecond. I really don't see that. I see people doing stuff summation by in an hour or within a 30-minute range, maybe. And in that case, you can split them to 2 different columns. And you can even have a quote time dimension that joins to the time value. It greatly reduces the size, and we're going to see that. The text part is, I've seen, you got the code, then you got the name, then you got the description, then you got the long description. So if you're going to put long descriptions on things, if you're using Power BI for modeling and analytics display, I don't see the benefit of having large text. The nice thing about Power BI and the analytical engine, I keep calling it analysis service tabular. Some people might call it X Velocity or Vertipact engine. It has this thing called a dictionary. And that dictionary can take your text values and generate, a list of them in a dictionary with a numeric column that then goes into the storage part and make the retrieval a lot faster. But if you can remove them, I would remove them. Tools are getting better and better with this inferred schema type analysis, but when you bring it in Excel or text files, there's really no metadata with it. And the data type sometimes just comes back as text. It used to, it would only examine like the first 100 rows. Now it does the first 200 rows or some custom setup that you're able to look at. But when that changing data type happens, you got to watch for errors because the first 200 might come back or the first 1,000 might come back where everything's numeric. So it puts it as a numeric data type. And then into the 10 or 20 or 100,000th row, someone put a piece of text in it, which can happen. And I'm going to show an example of that. And that text can't be converted. There's no implicit or explicit conversion of the text to a integer type. So let's look at the data types. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight into DAX Studio. And this is with our flat import that we had earlier. And I'm going to look at that metrics. And this time I'm going to go to the columns. And what you'll see towards the top is this guy, order date time 1, and it takes up about 16% of the size of the database. So this is a column with the date and the time strung together. But if I separate it, here's order date 1. That's only 2.73%. And if you scroll down this list, you don't even see order time. We actually have to scroll down further to get to order time. And now that order time broken out is 0.06% of the size. So it went from like 13, 14%, or was it 18%? Went to 16% to 2.73 and then less than 1% storage, just by separating them into two different columns. One's a date type and one's a time type. So that one thing there helped reduce the size of the database. And then, get rid of things that aren't used. If no one's using sales order number in any of the reports, you can get rid of that, and that's like 21% of the data. So here's a flat file coming in. And you'll notice right here, it says based on 200 rows. And it's going to look at these two columns, and it looks like everything's numeric. So I'm going to click OK. It's going to come in, and it's going to say that this is a numeric column and that one is. But it really just looked at it, profiling this first 1,000 rows. And if you look here, it says error 0%. So let me go down here and change this to the entire data set. And if you notice now, we've got less than 1% error. So because it made it an integer and there was text further down, I now have a duplicate or error in my data, which won't import. It'll prevent an import from happening. So I'm gonna right click, copy, right click, paste. I'm gonna go up to the little box up here, right click on it, and I'm gonna say keep errors. And when I do that, that copy of the query now shows me the errors. Okay, so I'm right here. I can click on the error, and it actually says, hey, that value is A, and it's trying to be an integer there. Now I can go back to this one, and let me get back to that. Is it column 6? And if I go over to the right, let me see here, I can say remove errors. Okay, so now I've got two queries, one without the error, one with the error, and then I could send that, I could send this like M code to someone or create a new model that imports this thing and gets those errors, and I could send them off to the person that exported that data and said, hey, 3 rows were in error. Okay, so just quickly to show you how one of those data types can affect your thing. So the other part of that would be to change that column instead of a numeric, I would change the type to text. Right? All right, that solves the error, but now I've created a text data type instead of a numeric data type. All right, so, a busy page is slower. Look into doing drill through to go to details. There's a thing called sync slicers. So you could have slicers on your initial screen, your main one, and then sync those with the others. So when someone goes into it, it's already being filtered by something. Mainly, you want to train users on the filter pane because sometimes they see filters and sometimes they don't. So always best to make sure they're aware of a filter pane. There's a thing called edit interactions. So like we had the two fact tables, if there's not a conform dimension to it, there's no reason a visual on fact table A needs to filter a visual on fact table B. You can turn that edit interaction off between them, which will help save refreshing time. And let's look at a demo of that. So let's go get a busy report. And I'll just show you one simple way to do drill through and edit interaction. I have a screen with some visuals on it, and then it has a table. If you can see, the bar on the table is still kind of scrolling up as this comes into display. What I could do, right click, I'm going to duplicate the screen. Rename it drill just to make it simple. Over here on the right is something called drill through fields. So I'm going to go up here to category, and I'm going to drag my category into there. Now what that does is it brings a back arrow onto the screen. But what I'm going to do, since I made a copy, I'm going to go ahead and delete all these other visuals off. And for now, I'm not going to try to resize it because of my mouse issues. But I'm going to go to the busy one. I'm going to go to the table, get rid of it. And now if I go right click, let's say on this donut chart, I'm not using a pie chart, this beautiful donut chart that mimics a pie chart. When I right click on it now, since it has category in the visual, it now has a menu choice to let me go drill through into another tab. So now you're pushing a filter across of that. Not only that, but if I go back and say I want to change the year, and then I go right click, drill through, drill. If I hover over that table, there's a little filter, and it shows me that not only from that drill through to the category filtered it, but also the filter I applied from a slicer did it as well, which is nice. I'll come back up here, go back. And also, if I click on one of these visuals, say I don't want the bar chart to be filtered, by the year, or I don't want the sum of sales to be filtered by that. If I go up to this format menu choice and over to edit interactions, then you'll notice these little active filters on the other visuals. So this means it's being filtered. There's two different types. One's complete, one is partial, but I can go take that filter off of those. And then when I'm interacting with, when I'm interacting with that, those should not, well, I guess I didn't turn it off on that one. There you go. Probably what I want to do too is clear. Let's clear this filter there. So as I click here, I'm not filtering these other things. And the edit interaction. So, it's not refreshing a visual from another visual. The filtering just stays within that particular visual. I thought that was pretty cool. All right, let's open up our final demo. Hopefully this one's going to take a lot more work, but I did create it right before the talk. So maybe I can just show what it does. I'm supposed to all go, ooh, ah, so impressive, Thomas. I remember when I developed software, this was a long time ago, like the 90s, maybe early 2000s. You would always have to have a keystroke that did whatever a mouse did. So your interface would always have, like your tab order had to be correct. You should be able to do anything with a keyboard. So like I was still using Alt spacebar to bring up the menu in the upper left that lets me minimize or maximize windows. So I'm still used to the keyboard part, which is good. So last thing we'll talk about is incremental refresh. So, if you have to refresh your whole model all the time, it can get a little costly. It also, when you do a refresh of a model, it usually takes 2.5 times the memory for that. That's an estimation. It's not always exact because that evictable memory as it's doing the processing. So they just say that to give a cushion. But if I have a 10 meg model, it's going to take another 10 megs to create a separate one, some extra room in case it's got to run some sort of queries, and then it replaces the existing one once it's finished. So the less processing you do, the more memory you can save on your capacity, which would affect other people viewing it. So introduce incremental refresh. This was possible back in the analysis services day, but you had to do all this manually. So this is brilliant. When they created this, I mean, people were just shouting for joy, especially because you can do it between two different dates, which we're going to just look at one, but it's based on a date. You do have to have a premium or at least an F64 fabric capacity. I put PPU in there. I'm guessing you can use PPU for it. I didn't know that. If that's the case, maybe you can use a smaller F capacity. Maybe when I first wrote this, it was just the F64 is supported. It is all managed by the service, so you don't really have to do much work here. We're going to look at the partitions that it does create. You do need to manage your source data, the date, time, data type it needs. And it's all consolidated in the background. So as time goes by, it consolidates partitions as the days go by. And you don't have to do any of this stuff. You just have to do all this manually, which was just unbelievable. So this is a model. And if you notice, all we have is year 2022. And what that is, inside of your transformation, you have to have a range start and a range end. These both have to be date time data types. So the column that you do the filtering in this case, we're doing it with date key, which is really the only date column in here. And you do a between. So let me come over here to the filter part, click that, and you can see how to set it up. You say is after or equal to range start, is before range end. So in my model, in developing here, I can just use a year's worth of data. So I'm not pulling all the data into here. When I deploy that, this gets deployed. I've got to go to settings. I got to get my data gateway connection set up. There's one here called parameters. And you can see those two values. So even if I'm not using incremental refresh, I could come in here, change the values, and then refresh the model to produce more data. But at the time, if I go into the deployed model, you'll see just that 1 year, okay? So now, if I come out to here and I go to sales and go down to incremental refresh, I could tell it, okay, this is the sales table. I want to do the incremental refresh. I'm going to turn it on. It's going to say, what archive starting value? I'm going to say 3 years, and I'm going to do 1 month. And what this is going to do, it's going to just look 3 years back on the data. As a year goes by, it's going to take the old one off and put the new one on as time goes by. And the incremental refresh is only going to look at the last month of data to refresh. There's a bunch of variations on that. What I want to show too is there's this here, detect data changes. So I can actually detect data changes and change that. So right now it's using the date key as the partition. So maybe partition by order date. But if I had a update, insert date, something like that, I could use that as my change indicator to only put in new data based on that date, not the one that I'm creating the partitions to. So you can actually separate those two. We're not going to do that just for simplicity. And I'm going to apply. Now, if I go deploy or publish this model, I'm going to save it as a different name just to show y'all the differences. So now it's deploying to my workspace. It's a premium workspace. And we should eventually see that come up. Yeah, there's 3. So the first thing I've got to go do is get my gateway to be active. I've already got it one set up, so I really just have to go do that and apply. And then I've got to do an initial refresh. So let me go back to my workspace. And again, if I go look at that report, I would see just that one particular year. But I'm going to go do a refresh. And that's going to take about a minute. So I'm going to show you one that's already been done. I'm going to go down here to this second one. Oops. Click on this and go to refresh history. And what you're going to see here is the first one took about a minute and 2 seconds. The second one only took about 16 seconds because it only refreshed new data inside of the database. So as that's refreshing, it's going to take about a minute. But if I go into that second one, you're going to see the 2005 data because I've already imported it. But that other one, you would only see these 3 years. Okay. So in my database here, I'll show you what's in it. By min and max date, you'll see only 2000 or 2020, 2018 to 2024 of December. If I go insert some more rows, which I'm just going to insert 3 days in 2025. Run this again. You'll see that 2020. Oh, you didn't see. Oh, you know why? Like all good database administrators, right? You got to do a begin transaction and then a commit. All y'all do that, right? All you good DBAs, right? Yeah. So I didn't do the commit just in case I wanted to roll it back. So 12/31/2024, and now I should have 2025 data. So let's see. Yeah, it finished refreshing. Good. Now this is what I'm going to do. I am going to go. I wish I could show this better, but I'm going to do my best here. I'm going into DAX Studio, okay? And this is that current model that we're showing with the increment 1. You'll see there's a partition for 2024, 2023, 2022. And originally, what you would see here would be an empty Q101. That's for that one month that's in there. Now, if I go, let me see if I could change this. If I could change this to that other model. There we go. 3. Woo. View metrics. Should be able to just hit enter. Well, when it comes through, we can click on partitions and then get to the cells. There we go. You see how it's 0? That's because that first refresh that took a minute is 0. Now, if I go to it and I refresh that one, now that should take less than 20 seconds because all it's going to do is it's going to look at that 2025 Q1 month 1, and it's only going to refresh that partition, which you can do with code. You can say refresh this partition. So if ever data was incrementally loaded or not incrementally loaded, you could go back to the 2023 one, go to that one partition and just refresh it on the service. Now that should give us different refresh history. Yeah. So now you see, a minute, 30 seconds versus about 18 seconds. Not only that, we only did a fraction of the size. So if we go back to this and I go do that view metrics again, now you see it's full. And all it did was refresh that one partition. Pretty neat, huh? That was a big deal when it came out. All right, that was my last one. Thank you very much. Thomas LeBlanc, Twitter at the Smiling DBA. I have a blog, thomas-leblanc.com. I might publish something once every 2 months. I do a little bit more on LinkedIn than I do on my blog. And you can email me, thesmilingdba@gmail.com.
Hey, Thomas, that was good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for joining us.
No
Yeah,
problem.
that was a great session. I know everybody's get off, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Thomas, I just have one quick question for you. When you're using an incremental refresh, do you find that slows down your DAX measure performance?
No,
When it has to compute across partitions, I mean.
it's a good question. I don't think so. It might even help because if you're if you're filtered by a year or a month or something, maybe it can get the data back quicker. But I don't know the details of that. I never heard it. It's so frequently that we do it because a lot of clients that we see have that updated date on their rows in their transaction data. So we use it a lot. It's frequently used. I don't know if I've ever saw or heard of an issue, but I mean that's a good idea. I'll ask Dan, my buddy, see if he's come up with something, or maybe we'll create something. I'm doing something right now comparing hash keys to integer keys for dimension relationships, and we should have something out pretty soon, article wise, on that in our examination of it. So I might add that to the testing because we are testing queries right now.
Well, that sounds great. Well, thanks again, Thomas. We appreciate you being here. And just a reminder that we do have our February session that you can register for now. So that is data-driven fitness, leveraging Power BI to optimize health behavior change. That's on Meetup. You can sign up for that right now. That's on Thursday, February 20th at 11:30. And we appreciate seeing everybody. Hope to see you guys next time. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.